Alrighty. Alrighty. Let's swap over to here. And go ahead and get rid of this. Sorry for the delay. I had to make sure I had tea, or else my voice will drop out. And yes, we continue the adventure. Very, very slowly. We're on chapter 4. Let me just make sure that I've got this all set up so we can actually see what's going on. Okay, you. Nope, we want. All right. Let's change you to you. All right, there we go. Move over this way. So we want to set this at 300% zoom. Ooh, jeez. What am I doing? What am I doing? Wait. Nope. Chapter 4. All right, now. I really hate this interface on this thing. All right. Let's see, 200%. So if we go 200%. All right. Then we go like this. Like this. Here we go. This. Just a little closer there. Okay. Okay. We could probably go like that. And then like that. And just gonna put this gold on top. And kablam! There we go. Sorry about that. A little bit of running around and snagging things. So we'll see how well this works. I don't like that. What? Man, this, let me tell you, this ebook reader is, something else. I don't like this. All right. I'm going to have to go to 100. That's not really visible, is it? Sorry. Little bit of scuff and technical details. Oh, okay, we can just do that. All right. It's annoying, but we can make it work. We'll make it work. Okay. Chapter 4. So we had just, at the end of chapter 3, if you remember, we had just left the last homely home, which is Elrond's house in the last homely house, I think it was, which is Elrond's house. And now we are about to go into the Misty Mountains. Oh my goodness. Oh, this thing's annoying. Okay. Let's see. Is there another way to look? Hold on. Thing color pin the middle. Okay. All right. I would rather get this right. So I'm just gonna not that. This. Not that. This. There we go. Give me 1 minute to try and figure this out. All right. Let's see. I believe last time we did this one, this is the other version of their... Yeah, this is what we did. This was what we did. It's not as pretty, but, you know. Whatever. At least it's usable. All right, so let's see how that looks on here. Okay. We want to do like this. And then, sorry for the typical bit of scuff as we try and figure this out. This, then we can go like this, and we can make that bigger. And we can do like this. Ta-da! Okay. Now it's readable. Okay, it's not going to randomly decide to reset the zoom on itself. You know. Craziness. Okay, now, what's this? Chapter 4, Overhill and Underhill. There are many paths that led up to these mountains, and many passes over them, but most of the paths were cheats and deceptions and led nowhere or to bad ends, and most of the passes were infested with evil things and dreadful dangers. The dwarves and the hobbit, helped by the wise advice of Elrond and the knowledge and memory of Gandalf, took the right road to the right pass. Long days after they had climbed out of the valley and left the last homely house miles behind, they were still going up and up and up. It was a hard path and a dangerous path, a crooked way and a lonely and long. Now they could look back over the lands they had left, laid out behind them, far below, far, far away to the west, where things were blue and faint. Bilbo knew there lay his own country of safe and comfortable things, and his little hobbit hole. He shivered. It was getting bitter cold up here, and the wind came shrill among the rocks. Boulders, too, at times came galloping down the mountainsides, let loose by the midday sun upon the snow, and passed amongst them, which was lucky, or over their heads, which was alarming. The nights were comfortless and chill, and they did not dare to sing or talk too loud, for the echoes were uncanny, and the silence seemed to dislike being broken, except by the noise of water and the wail of wind and the crack of stone. The summer's getting on down below, thought Bilbo. And haymaking is going on, and picnics, and there'll be harvesting and blackberrying before we even begin to go down the other side at this rate. And the others were thinking equally gloomy thoughts, although they had said goodbye to Elrond in high hope of a midsummer morning. They had, although when they had said goodbye to Elrond in the high hope of a midsummer morning, they had spoken gaily of the passage of the mountains and of riding swift across the lands beyond. They had thought of coming to the secret door in the lonely mountains, perhaps that very next moon of autumn, and perhaps it will be on Durin's Day, they had said. Only Gandalf had shaken his head and said nothing. Dwarves had not passed that way in many years, but Gandalf had, and he knew how evil and danger had grown and thriven in the wild since the dragons had spread or had driven men from the lands, and the goblins had spread in secret after the Battle of the Mines of Moria. Even the good plans of wise wizards like Gandalf and of good friends like Elrond go astray sometimes. And when you're off on a dangerous adventure over the edge of the wild, and Gandalf was wise enough wizard to know it, he knew that something unexpected might happen, and he hardly dared hope that they would pass without fearful adventure over these great tall mountains with lonely peaks and valleys where no king ruled. They did not. All was well until one day they met a thunderstorm. More than a thunderstorm, a thunder battle. You know how terrific a really big thunderstorm can be down in the land and in the river valley, especially at times when two great thunderstorms meet and clash. More terrible still are thunder and lightning up in the mountains at night. When the storms come from the east and the west and make war, the lightning splinters on the peaks and rocks shiver, and great crashes split the air, go rolling and tumbling into every cave and hollow, and the darkness is filled with overwhelming noise and sudden light. Bilbo had never seen or imagined anything of the kind. They were high up in a narrow place with dreadful fall into a dim valley on one side of them. They were sheltering under a hanging rock for the night, and he lay beneath a blanket and shook from head to toe. When he peeped out in the lightning flashes, he saw that across the valley the stone giants were out. They were hurling rocks at one another for game and catching them and tossing them down into the darkness, where they smashed amongst the trees far below. They were splintered into little bits with a bang. Then came a wind and a rain, and the wind whipped the rain and the hail about in every direction, so an overhanging rock was no protection at all. Soon they were getting drenched, and their ponies were standing with their heads down and their tails between their legs, and some of them were whinnying in fright. They could hear the giants guffawing and shouting over all the mountainsides. Sounds like the giants are having a grand old time. Let's go party with the giants. They seem to be having fun. This won't do at all, said Thorin. If we don't get blown off or drowned or struck by lightning, we shall be picked up by some giant and kicked sky high for a football. Well, if you know anywhere better, take us there, said Gandalf, who was feeling very grumpy and was far from happy about the giants himself. The end of their argument was that they sent Fili and Kili to look for better shelter. They had very sharp eyes, and being the youngest of the dwarves by some 50 years, they usually got these sorts of jobs, when everybody could see that it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. There's nothing like looking if you want to find something, or so Thorin said to the young dwarves. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you are after. So it proved to be on this occasion. Soon Fili and Kili came crawling back, holding on to the rocks in the wind. We found a dry cave, they said. Not far around the next corner, and the ponies could get inside. Have you thoroughly explored it? Said the wizard, who knew that caves up the mountains were seldom unoccupied. Yes, they said, although everybody knew that they could not have been long about it. They'd come back too quick. It isn't all that big, and it doesn't go that far back. That, of course, is a dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far back sometimes, or where a passage behind may lead to, or what's waiting for you inside. But now Fili and Kili's news seemed good enough, so they all got up and prepared to move. The wind was howling and the thunder still growling, and they had a business getting themselves and their ponies along. Still, it was not very far to go, and before long they came to a big rock standing out in the path. If you stepped behind, you found a low arch in the side of the mountain. There was just room to get the ponies through, and with a squeeze, and when they had been unpacked and unsaddled. As they passed into the arch, it was good to hear the wind and rain outside instead of all about them, and to feel safe from the giants and their rocks. But the wizard was taking no risks. He lit up his wand, as he did that day in Bilbo's dining room. That seemed so long ago, if you remember. And by its light, they explored the cave from end to end. It was quite fair size, but not too large and mysterious. It had a dry floor and some comfortable nooks. At one end, there was room for the ponies, and there they stood, mighty glad of the change, steaming and champing in their nosebags. Oin and Gloin wanted to light a fire at the door to dry their clothes, but Gandalf would not hear of it. So they spread their wet things on the floor and got the dry ones out of their bundles, and they made their blankets comfortable, got out their pipes and blew smoke rings, which Gandalf turned into different colors and set dancing by the roof to amuse them. They talked and forgot about the storm and discussed what each of them would do with their share of the treasure when they got it, which at the moment did not seem so impossible. And so they dropped off to sleep one by one, and that was the last time that they used the ponies' baggages, tools, and paraphernalia that they had brought with them. Turned out to be a good thing that night that they had brought little Bilbo with them after all. for somehow he could not get to sleep for a long while. And when he did sleep, he had nasty dreams. He dreamt that a crack in the wall at the back of the cave got bigger and bigger and opened wider and wider, and he was very afraid, but could not call out or do anything but lie and look. And then he dreamed that the floor of the cave was giving way, and he was slipping, beginning to fall down and down, goodness knows where to. At that, he woke up with a terrible start and found that part of his dream was true. A crack had opened in the back of the cave and was already a wide passage. He was just in time to see the last of the ponies' tails disappearing into it. Of course, he gave a very loud yell, as loud a yell as a hobbit can give, which is surprising for their size. Out jumped goblins, big goblins, great ugly-looking goblins, lots of goblins. Before you could say rocks and blocks, there were 6 of them to each dwarf at least, and 2 even for Bilbo, and they were all grabbed and carried through the crack before he could say tinder and flint. But not Gandalf. Bilbo's yell had done that much good. It had wakened him up wide in a splintered second, and when the goblins came to grab him, there was a terrific flash like lightning in the cave and a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. The crack closed with a snap, and Bilbo and the dwarves were on the wrong side of it. Where was Gandalf? Of that, neither they nor the goblins had any idea, and the goblins did not wait to find out. They seized Bilbo and the dwarves and hurried them along. It was deep, dark, such as only goblins have taken to living in the heart of the mountains. Can see through. The passages there were crossed and tangled in all directions, but the goblins knew their way, as well as you do to the nearest post office. And the way went down and down. It was most horribly stuffy. The goblins were very rough and pinched unmercifully and chuckled and laughed in their horrible stony voices. And Bilbo was more unhappy even than when the troll had picked him up by his toes. He wished again and again for his nice, bright hobbit hole, not for the last time. Now came a glimmer of red light before them. The goblins began to sing or croak, keeping time with the slap of their flat feet on the stone and shaking their prisoners as well. Clap, snack, the black crack, grip, grab, pinch, nab, and down you go to Goblin Town. You go, my lad. Clash, crash, crush, smash, hammer and tongs, knocker and gongs, pound, pound, far underground. Ho, my lad! Swish, smack, whip, crack, batter and beat, yammer and bleat, work, work, nor dare to shirk, where goblins quaff and goblins laugh, round and round, far underground, below, my lad. It sounded truly terrifying. The walls echoed with the clap, snap, and the crush, smash, and to the ugly laughter of their ho, my lad. The general meaning of the song was all too plain, for now the goblins took out whips and whipped them with a swish, smack, and set them running as fast as they could in front of them. And more than one of the dwarves were already yammering and bleeding like anything when they stumbled into the big cavern. It was lit by a great red fire in the middle, and by torches along the walls, and it was full of goblins. They all laughed and stamped and clapped their hands when the dwarves, with poor little Bilbo at the back and nearest the whips, came running in. While the goblin drivers whooped and cracked their whips behind, the ponies were already there huddled in a corner. And there were all the baggages and packages lying broken open and being rummaged by goblins and smelt by goblins and fingered by goblins and quarreled over by goblins. I'm afraid that was the last they ever saw of those excellent little ponies, including a jolly, sturdy little white fellow that Elrond had lent to Gandalf, since his horse was not suitable for the mountain path. For goblins eat horses and ponies and donkeys and other much more dreadful things, and are always hungry. Just now, however, the prisoners were thinking only of themselves. The goblin changed their hands behind their backs and linked them all together in a line and dragged them to the far end of the cavern, with little Bilbo tugging at the end of the row. There were shadows, and a large flat stone sat a tremendous goblin with a huge head, and armed goblins were standing around him carrying axes and the bent swords they use. Now, goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. They can tunnel and mine as well as any but the most skilled dwarves when they take the trouble, although they're usually untidy and dirty. Hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and all the instruments of torture they make very well, or get other people to make their design. Prisoners and slaves that have to work till they die for want of air and light. It's not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large numbers of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them. And also not working with their own hands more than they could help. But in those days and in those wild parts, they had not advanced, as it could be called, so far. They did not hate dwarves especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, and particularly the orderly and the prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them, but they had a special grudge against Thorin's people because of the war, which you have heard mentioned, but which does not come into this tale. And anyway, goblins don't care who they catch, as long as it's done smart and secret and the prisoners are not able to defend themselves. "Who are these miserable persons?" said the great goblin. "Dwarves and this," said one of the drivers, pulling Bilbo's chain so that he fell forward onto his knees. "We found them sheltering in our front porch." "What do you mean by it?" said the great goblin, turning to Thorin. "Up to no good, I'll warrant. Spying on the private business of my people, I'll guess. Thieves, I shouldn't be surprised to learn. Murderers, friends of the elves, not unlikely. Come, what have they got to say?" "Thorin the dwarf, at your service," he replied. It was merely a polite nothing. "Of the things which you suspect and imagine, we had no idea at all. We sheltered from a storm in what seemed a convenient cave and unused, and nothing was further from our thought than inconveniencing goblins in any way whatsoever." That was true enough. Said the great goblin. "So you say, might I ask what you were doing up in the mountains at all? Where were you coming from and where were you going? In fact, I should like to know all about you. Not that it will do you much good, Thorin Oakenshield. I know too much about your folk already. But let's have the truth, or I will prepare something particularly uncomfortable for you." "We were on a journey to visit our relatives, our nephews and nieces of the first, second, and third cousins, and other descendants of our grandfathers who live east side of these truly hospitable mountains," said Thorin, not quite knowing what to say all at once in a moment, when obviously the exact truth would not do at all. "He's a liar, oh tremendous one," said one of the drivers. "Several of our people were struck by lightning in the cave when we invited these creatures to come below. They're as dead as stones, and he has not explained this." And he held out the sword which Thorin had worn, the sword which had come from the troll's lair. The great goblin gave a truly awful howl of rage when he looked upon it, and all his soldiers gnashed their teeth and clashed their shields and stamped. They knew the sword at once. It had killed hundreds of goblins in its time, when the fair elves of Gondolin hunted them in the hills or did battle before the walls. They had called it Orcrest, Goblin Cleaver, but the goblins simply called it Biter. They hated it, and hated worse anyone who carried it. "Murderers and elf friends!" the great goblin shouted. "Slash them, beat them, bite them, gnash them, take them away to the dark holes full of snakes and never let them see light again." He was in such a rage that he jumped off his seat and rushed at Thorin with his mouth open. Just at that moment, all the lights of the cavern went out, and the great fire went off. Poof! It was a tower of blue, glowing smoke right up to the roof that scattered piercing white sparks all amongst the goblins. The yells and yammering, croaking, gibbering, gabbering, howls and growls, curses, shrieks that followed were far beyond description. Several hundred wildcats and wolves being roasted slowly alive together would not have compared to it. The sparks were burning holes in the goblins, and the smoke that now fell from the roof made the air too thick even for their eyes to see through. Soon they were falling over one another and rolling in heaps on the floor, biting and kicking and fighting as if they'd all gone mad. Suddenly, a sword flashed in its own light. Bilbo saw it go right through the great goblin as he stood dumbfounded in the middle of his rage. He fell dead, and the goblin soldiers fled before the sword, shrieking into the darkness. The sword went back into its sheath. "Follow me, quick," said a voice, fierce and quiet. And before Bilbo understood what was happening, he was trotting along again as fast as he could trot at the end of the line, down more dark passages, with the yells of the goblin hall growing fainter behind him. A pale light was leading them on. "Quicker, quicker," said the voice. "The torches will be soon relit." "Half a minute," said Dory, who was at the back next to Bilbo, and a decent fellow. He made the hobbit scramble onto his shoulders as best he could with his tied hands, and then off they went at a run, with a clank of chains and many a stumble, since they had no hands to steady themselves with. Not for a long while did they stop, and by that time they must have been right down in the very mountain's heart. Then Gandalf lit up his wand. Of course it was Gandalf, but just then they were too busy to ask how he got there. He took out the sword again, and again it flashed in the dark by itself. It burned with a rage that made it gleam if goblins were about. Now it was bright as a blue flame for delight in killing the great lord of the cave. It made no trouble whatsoever of cutting through goblin chains and setting all the prisoners free as quickly as possible. Thor's name was Glamordring, the foe hammer, if you remember. The goblins called it Beater, and hated it worse than Biter, if possible. Orcris, too, had been saved, for Gandalf had brought it along as well, snatching it from one of the terrified guards. Gandalf thought of most things, and though he could not do everything, he could do a great deal for his friends in a tight corner. "Are we all here?" said he, leading his sword, handing his sword back to Thorin with a bow. "Let me see. 1, that's Thorin. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're Philly and Kelly. Here we are, 12, 13, and there's Mr. Baggins, 14. Well, it might be worse. Then again, it might be a good deal better. No ponies, no food, and no knowing quite where we are, and hordes of angry goblins just behind. On we go." On they went. Gandalf was quite right. They began to hear... They began to hear goblin noises and horrible cries far behind in the passages that they had come through. That set them on faster than ever, and as poor Bilbo could not possibly go half as fast, for dwarves can roll along at a tremendous pace, I can tell you, when they have to, they took in turns to carry him on their backs. Still, goblins go faster than dwarves, and these goblins knew the way better. They had made the pass themselves, and they were madly angry. So, that do what they could, the dwarves heard the cries and howls getting closer and closer. Soon they could even hear the flap of goblin feet, many feet, which seemed only just around the last corner. The blink of red torches could be seen behind them in the tunnel that they were following, and they were getting deadly tired. "Oh, why did I ever leave my hobbit hole?" said poor Mr. Baggins, bumping up and down on Bombur's back. "Oh, why did I ever bring a wretched little hobbit on a treasure hunt?" said poor Bombur, who was fat and staggered along with sweat dripping down his nose, his heat and terror. At this point, Gandalf fell behind, and Thorin with him. They turned a sharp corner. "About turn," he shouted. "Draw your sword, Thorin." There was nothing else to be done, and the goblins did not like it. They came scurrying around the corner in full cry and found Goblin Cleaver and Foe Hammer shining cold and bright right in their astonished eyes. The ones in front dropped their torches and gave one yell before they were killed. The ones behind yelled more and leapt back, knocking over those that were running after them. "Biter and Beater!" they shrieked, and soon they were all in a confusion, and most of them were hustling back the way they had come. It was quite a long while before any of them dared to turn that corner. By that time, the dwarves had gone on again, a long, long way into the dark tunnels of the goblins' realm. When the goblins discovered that, they put out their torches and slipped on soft shoes and chose out the very quickest runners with the sharpest eyes and ears. These ran forward as swift as weasels in the dark, with hardly any more noise than bats. That is why neither Bilbo, nor the dwarves, nor even Gandalf heard them coming, nor did they see them. But they were seen by the goblins that ran up silently behind, for Gandalf was letting his wand give a faint light to help the dwarves as they went along. Quite suddenly, Dory, now at the back again carrying Bilbo, was grabbed from behind in the dark. He shouted and fell, and the hobbit rolled off his shoulders into the blackness, bumped his head on a hard rock, and remembered nothing more. That was chapter 4. Chapter 5 is Riddles in the Dark. So, what do you think? I hope you enjoyed chapter 4. I am not practiced at doing voices very well, so I end up hurting my voice when I do them. But they sound so much better. I don't know. I think they sound so much better. See, how long is chapter 5? Let's see. Chapter 6 is on page 126, and chapter 5 is 98. So, only a few more. Do you want to go on one more chapter? I still have a little bit of tea left, so let's keep rolling. Let's do one more chapter for tonight. We've been going for half an hour, so yeah, that sounds about right. Another chapter will be about an hour, so it'll be good. Excellent. When Bilbo opened his eyes, he wondered if he had, for it was just as dark as with them shut. No one was anywhere near him. Just imagine his fright. Yeah, so something actually to look on. This might be on your end. Hold on, let me pull this up. Because I was thinking about it and I have an idea. So if you look at the video stream, on the bottom right, there is a cog. Right, it says clip, and then there's a cogwheel. If you click on the cogwheel, the top option says quality. And then it'll say some number like, or it might say auto. Yeah, it probably says auto on yours. So if you click that and then click 1080p 60, parentheses source. So it should be the first one down below auto. If you do that, then that should stop it from, because I think what it's doing is it's like, oh, I'm not quite buffering well enough, and it drops the quality down, then it buffers up and jumps the quality back up, and that can be really annoying. So that should work. Let me know if that fixes it. Because I was thinking about that last time you had mentioned it. I'm like, Twitch is really bad for when you set it on auto, because I do the same thing sometimes. I'm like, why does this keep looking blurry? Yeah, right. Anyway, so all right, so let's keep going. He could hear nothing, see nothing, and he could feel nothing except the stone of the floor. Very slowly, he got up and groped about on all fours till he touched the wall of the tunnel. But neither up nor down could he find anything. Nothing at all. No sign of the goblins, no sign of the dwarves. His head was swimming, and he was far from certain even of the direction that they had been going in when he had his fall. He guessed as well as he could and crawled along for a good way till suddenly his hand met what felt like a tiny ring of cold metal lying on the floor of the tunnel. It was a turning point in his career, but he did not know it. He put the ring in his pocket almost without thinking. It certainly did not seem of any particular use at the moment. He did not go much further, but sat down on the cold floor and gave himself up to complete miserableness for a long while. He thought of himself frying bacon and eggs in his own kitchen at home. He could feel inside that it was high time for a meal or some meal or other, but that only made him miserabler. He could not think what to do, nor could he think what had happened, or why he had been left behind, or why, if he had been left behind, the goblins had not caught him, or even why his head was so sore. The truth was, he had been lying quiet, out of sight and out of mind, in a very dark corner for a long while. After some time, he felt for his pipe. It was not broken, and that was something. Then he felt for his pouch, and there was some tobacco in it, and that was something more. And he felt for matches and could not find any at all, and shattered his hopes completely. Just as well for him as he agreed when he came to his senses. Goodness knows what striking of matches and the smell of tobacco would have brought on him out of dark holes in that horrible place. Still, at the moment he felt very crushed. But in slapping all of his pockets and feeling around himself for matches, his hand came on the hilt of his little sword, the little dagger that he had gotten from the trolls, and that he had quite forgotten. Nor, fortunately, had the goblins noticed it, as he wore it inside his breeches. Now he drew it out, and it shone pale and dim before his eyes. So it's an elvish blade, too, he thought, and goblins are not very near, yet not far enough. But somehow he was comforted. It was rather splendid to be wearing a blade made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars, of which so many songs had been sung. And also he noticed that such weapons made great impression on the goblins that came upon them suddenly. Go back, he thought. No good at all. Go sideways? Impossible. Go forward? Only thing to do. On we go. So up he got and trotted along with his little sword held in front of him and one hand feeling on the wall, and his heart all a patter and a pitter. Now certainly Bilbo was in what is called a tight place, but you must remember it's not quite so tight for him as it would have been for me or for you. Hobbits are not quite like ordinary people, and after all, if their hobbits are nice cheery places and properly aired, quite different to the tunnels of the goblins, still they are more used to tunneling than we are, and do not easily lose their sense of direction underground, not when their heads have recovered from being bumped. Also, they can move quietly and hide easily and recover wonderfully from falls and bruises. And they have a fund of wisdom and wise sayings that men have mostly never heard of or forgotten long ago. I should not have liked to be in Mr. Baggins' place all the same. The tunnel seemed to have no end. All he knew is that it was still going down pretty steadily and kept in the same direction in spite of a twist or turn or two. There were passages leading off to the side every now and then, and as he knew by the glimmer of the sword or could feel with his hand on the wall. Of these he took no notice except to hurry past for fear of goblins or half-imagined dark things coming out of them. On and on he went, and down, and still he heard no sound of anything except the occasional whir of a bat by his ears, which startled him at first till it became too frequent to bother about. I do not know how long he kept on like this, hating to go on, not daring to stop, on, until he was tireder than tired. It seemed like all the way to tomorrow and over all these days beyond. Suddenly, without any warning, he trotted splash into water. Ugh, it was icy cold. That pulled him up sharp and short. He did not know whether it was a pool in the path or the edge of an underground stream that crossed the passage or the brink of a deep, dark subterranean lake. The sword was hardly shining at all. He stopped and he could hear when he listened hard drops dripping from unseen roof into the water below, but there seemed no other sort of sound. So this is a pool or lake and not an underground river, he thought. Still, he did not dare to wade out into the darkness. He could not swim, and he thought too of nasty, slimy things with bulging blind eyes wriggling in the water. There are strange things living in pools and lakes in the hearts of mountains. Fish whose fathers swam in goodness knows how many years ago and never swam out, while their eyes grew bigger and bigger and bigger from trying to see in the blackness. Also, there are other things more slimy than fish. Even the tunnels and caves the goblins have made for themselves, there are things living unbeknownst to them that have sneaked in from the outside to lie up in the dark. Some of the caves, too, go back to the beginning, to ages before the goblins, who only widened them and joined them up with passages. And their original owners are still there in odd corners, slinking and nosing about. Deep down here by the dark water lived old Golem, a slimy creature. I don't know where he came from, nor who or what he was. He was Golem, as dark as darkness, except for two big, round, pale eyes in his thin face. He had a little boat, and he rowed it quite quietly on the lake, for the lake it was, wide and deep and deadly cold. He paddled it with great, large feet dangling over the side, but never a ripple did he make. Not he. He was looking out of his pale lamp-like eyes for blind fish, which he grabbed with long fingers, as quick as thinking. He liked meat, too. Goblin he thought good when he could get it, but he took care that they never found him out. He just throttled them from behind if they ever came down alone anywhere near the edge of the water while he was prowling about. They very seldom did, for they had a feeling that something unpleasant was lurking down there, down in the very roots of the mountain. They'd come on the lake when they were tunneling down long ago and had found they could go no further, so there their road ended in that direction. And there was no great reason to go that way unless the great goblin sent them. Sometimes he took a fancy for fish from the lake, and sometimes neither goblin nor fish came back. Actually, Golem lived in a slimy island of rock in the middle of the lake. He was watching Bilbo now from the distance with his pale eyes like telescopes. Bilbo could not see him, but he was wondering a lot about Bilbo, for he could see that he was no goblin at all. Golem got into his boat and shot off from the island, while Bilbo was sitting on the brink altogether flummoxed and at the end of his way and his wits. Suddenly up came Golem and whispered and hissed, "Bless us, my precious. I guess it's a choice feast. At least a tasty morsel it'll make gum." They said Golem. He made a horrible swallowing noise in his throat. That was how he got his name, although he always called himself my precious. The hobbit jumped nearly out of his skin when the hiss came to his ears and suddenly saw the pale eyes sticking out at him. "Who are you?" he said, thrusting his dagger in front of him. "What is he, my precious?" whispered Golem, who always spoke to himself, though through never having anyone else to speak to. This is what he had come to find out, for he was not really very hungry at the moment, only curious, otherwise he would have grabbed first and whispered afterwards. "I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins, and I have lost the dwarves, and I have lost the wizard, and I don't know where I am, and I don't want to know, if only I can get away." "What has it got in its hands?" said Golem, looking at the sword, which he did not quite like. "A sword, a blade that came of Gondolin," said Golem, and became quite polite. "Perhaps you sit here and chats with it a bitsy, my precious. It likes riddles, perhaps it does it?" He was anxious to appear friendly, at any rate for the moment, until he found out more about the sword and the hobbit, and whether or not he was quite alone, really, and whether he was good to eat, and whether Golem was really hungry. Riddles were all he could think of, asking them, and sometimes guessing them, and had been the only game he ever had played with the other funny creatures sitting in their holes in the long ago, before he lost all his friends and was driven away alone. "Hi, Potato. Hello. Hello, Potato. Potato has come to say hi." "Hi, Potato. Hi, puppy. Are you here for Golem? Are you here for Golem, Potato?" Oh, he tipped his head when I said that. "He's a good boy. He's a good boy. Oh, yes. Yes, Mommy says hi. Mommy says hi. You're a good boy, Potato. Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Potato. Yeah. You are a good boy. I know. And now that you see me doing this and not giving you attention, you're going to be not a good boy, right? Do I know you, Potato? Or are you going to try and chew on something that you're not supposed to chew on? Yeah. Is that your modus operandi? You're a good boy. Yeah? What would you like? Oh, I know. You're so cute. Okay, you lay down. Good boy. Oh, that's a good job. There we go. Okay. He just nicely is laying down. We'll see how long this lasts. Okay. Where was I? Right. Riddles were all he could think of asking them, and sometimes guessing them. Had been the only game he had ever played with the other funny creatures sitting in their holes in the long ago, before he lost all his friends and was driven away alone and crept down into the dark under the very mountains. Very well, said Bilbo, who was anxious to agree until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, and whether he was a friend of the goblins. You ask first, he said, because he had not had time to think of a riddle. So Goblin hissed. What has roots says nobody sees, is taller than trees, goes up it goes, and yet never grows. Easy, said Bilbo. Mountain, I suppose. Doesn't guess easy. It must have a competition with us, my precious. If Precious asks and it doesn't answer, we eats it, my precious. If it asks us and we don't answer, then we does what it wants, eh? We show it the way out, yes. All right, said Bilbo, not daring to disagree and nearly bursting his brain to think of riddles that could save him from being eaten. 30 white horses on a red hill. First they champ, then they stamp, then they stand still. It was all I could think of. The idea of eating was rather on his mind. It was rather an old one, too, and Gollum knew the answer as well as you do, too. Chestnuts, chestnuts, he hissed. Teeth, my precious, but we only has 6. Then he asked his second. Voiceless it cries, wingless it flutters, toothless it bites, mouthless it mutters. Half a moment, cried Bilbo, who was still thinking uncomfortably about eating. Fortunately, he had heard this. He had heard something rather like this one before, and getting his wits back, he thought of the answer. Wind, of course, he said. And he was so pleased that he made up one on the spot. This'll puzzle the nasty little underground creature, he thought. An eye in a blue face saw an eye in a green face. That eye, like this eye, said the first eye, but in a low place, not a high place. Said Gollum. He'd been underground a long time and was forgetting this sort of thing, but just as Bilbo was beginning to hope the wretch would not be able to come up with the answer, Gollum brought up memories of ages and ages before when he had lived with his grandmother in a hole by the bank of a river. My precious, he said, sun on the daisies, it means it does. But these ordinary, above-ground, everyday sorts of riddles were tiring for him. Also, they reminded him of days when he had been less lonely and sneaky and nasty, and that put him out of temper. What is more, they made him hungry, so this time he tried something a bit more difficult and a bit more unpleasant. It cannot be seen, it cannot be felt, it cannot be heard, it cannot be smelt. It lies behind stars and under hills and empty holes it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter. Unfortunately for Gollum, Bilbo had heard of that sort of thing before. The answer was all around him anyway. Dark, he said, without even scratching his head or putting on his thinking cap. A box without hinges, key or a lid, yet golden treasure inside is hid, he said, to gain time until he could think of a really hard one. This he thought dreadfully easy, a dreadfully easy chestnut, although he had not asked it in his usual words, but it proved a nasty poser for Gollum. He hissed to himself and still did not answer. He whispered and spluttered. After some while, Bilbo became impatient. Well, what is it? He said. The answer's not a kettle boiling over, as you seem to think from the noise you're making. Give us a chance. It gives us a chance, my precious. Well, said Bilbo, after giving him a long chance. What about your guess? But suddenly Gollum remembered thieving from nests long ago and sitting under the riverbank teaching his grandmother to suck eggsies. It hissed. Eggsies it is. Then he asked, alive without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, ever drinking, all in mail, never clinking. He also, in his turn, thought this was a dreadfully easy one, but because he was always thinking of the answer, but he could not remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the egg question. All the same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo, who had never had anything to do with water if he could help it. I imagine you know the answer, of course, or can guess it as easily as winking, since you are sitting comfortably at home and not in the danger of being eaten to disturb your thinking. Bilbo sat and cleared his throat once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, Gollum began to hiss with pleasure to himself. Is it nice, my precious? Is it juicy? Is it scrumptiously crunchable? He began to peer at Bilbo out of the darkness. Half a moment, said the hobbit, shivering. I gave you a good long chance just now. It must make haste, said Gollum, beginning to climb out of his boat to the shore to get to Bilbo. But when he put his long, webby feet in the water, a fish jumped up in fright and fell on Bilbo's toes. Ugh, he said. It's cold and clammy, and he gasped. Fish! Fish! He cries. It's fish! Gollum was dreadfully disappointed, but Bilbo asked another riddle as quick as he could so that Gollum had to get back on his boat and think. No legs lay on one leg. 2 legs sat near 3 legs. 4 legs got some. It was not really the right time for this riddle, but Bilbo was hungry. Potato? Golem might have had some trouble guessing it if he had not asked it. If not asked another time. As it was, talking of fish, no legs was not very difficult, and after that, the rest was easy. Fish on a little table, man at a table sitting on the stool, the cat gets the bones. That, of course, is the answer, and Gollum soon gave it. He then thought the time had come. Potato. Okay, everything's still going. Potato, why don't you go downstairs? Go see mommy. Okay. Then he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible, and this is what he said. This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, and flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays kings, ruins towns, and beats high mountains down. Poor Bilbo sat in the dark thinking of all the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard of in tales, but not one of them had done all of these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different, and that he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and that was bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick out of his mouth. He wanted to shout, "Give me more time! Give me time!" But all that came out was a sudden squeal, was, "Time! Time!" Bilbo was saved by pure luck, for that, of course, was the answer. Gollum was disappointed once more, and now he was getting hungry. Where did the dog go? There he is. Potato. Potato, please get away from the wires. Potato, please get away from the cables. Hold on 1 second. Potato. Tato. Tutu. If you want to lay down, that's fine. Yeah. You want to lay down, that's fine. Otherwise, you need to go. Of course. Gollum was very disappointed once more, and now he was getting angry and also tired of the game. It had made him very hungry indeed. This time, he did not go back to the boat. He sat down in the dark by Bilbo. That made the hobbit most dreadfully uncomfortable and scattered his wits. He's got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes, yes, yes. Just one more question to guess. Yes, yes, said Gollum. But Bilbo simply could not think of any question. With that nasty, wet, cold thing sitting next to him and pawing and poking him, he scratched himself, he pinched himself. He still could not think of anything. Ask us, said Gollum. Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself. He gripped his little sword and even felt his pocket with his other hand. There he found the ring that he had picked up in the passage and forgotten about. What have I got in my pocket? He said aloud. He was talking to himself, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and he was frightfully upset. Not fair, it hissed. This isn't fair, my precious. Potato, what are you doing? Am I going to have to ask you to leave, Mr. Potato Dog? He knows that if he tries to chew on wires, he'll get my attention. Potato. Bubby. Do that. Like this dog. This dog, I'm telling you. All right. Where was I? It isn't fair, my precious, is it? To ask us what's got in its nasty little pockets is? Bilbo, seeing what happened and having got nothing better, stuck with his question. What have I got in my pocket? He said louder. This Gollum. Must give us 3 guesses, my precious. 3 guesses. Very well, guess away, said Bilbo. Handses, said Gollum. Wrong, said Bilbo, who had luckily just taken his hand out again. Guess again. Okay, good. He's chewing his toy now. Said Gollum, more upset than ever. He thought of all the things he kept in his own pockets. Fish bones, goblin teeth, wet shells, a bit of bat wing, a sharp stone to sharpen his fangs on, and other nasty things. He tried to think what other people keep in their pockets. Knife, he said at last. Wrong, said Bilbo, who had lost his some time ago. Last guess. Now Gollum was much worse state than when Bilbo had asked the egg question. He hissed and spluttered and rocked himself backwards and forwards and slapped his feet on the floor and wriggled and squirmed, but still he dare not waste his last guess. Come on, said Bilbo, I'm waiting. He tried to sound bold and cheerful, but did not feel either. Did not feel at all sure how this game was going to end, whether Gollum guessed right or not. Time's up, he said. String or nothing, shrieked Gollum, which was not quite fair, working in 2 guesses at once. What do you have there? What did you steal? Piece of plastic, whatever. Both wrong, cried Bilbo, very much relieved. And he jumped at once to his feet and put his back to the nearest wall and held out his little sword. He knew, of course, that the riddle game was sacred and of immense antiquity, and even wicked creatures were afraid to cheat when they played at it. But he felt he could not trust this slimy thing to keep any promise in a pinch. Any excuse would do for him to slide out of it. And after all, that last question had not been a genuine riddle according to the ancient laws. But at any rate, Gollum did not at once attack him. He could see the sword in Bilbo's hand. He sat shivering and whispering. At last, Bilbo could wait no longer. Well, he said, what about your promise? I want to go. You must show me the way. Did we say so, precious? Show the nasty little Bagginses the way out. Yes, yes. But what has it got in its pockets, not string, precious, but not nothing. Oh, no, Gollum. Never you mind, said Bilbo. A promise is a promise. Cross it is and patient, precious, said Gollum. But it must wait. Yes, it must. We can't go up the tunnel so hasty. We must go and get something first. Yes, things to help us. Well, hurry up, said Bilbo, relieved to think of Gollum going away. He thought he was just making an excuse and did not mean to come back. What was Gollum talking about? What useful thing could he keep out in the dark lake? But he was wrong. Gollum did mean to come back. He was angry now and hungry, and he was a miserable, wicked creature. And already he had a plan. Not far away was his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing, and there in his hiding place he kept a few wretched oddments and one very beautiful thing. A very beautiful, very wonderful. He had a ring, a golden ring, a precious ring. Birthday present, he whispered to himself, that as he had often done in the endless dark days. That's what we wants now. Yes, we wants it. He wanted it because it was a ring of power. And if you slipped that ring on your finger, you were invisible. Only the full sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint. My birthday present. It came to me on my birthday, my precious. So he had always said to himself, but who knows how Gollum came by that present ages ago in the old days when such rings were still at large in the world. Perhaps even the master who ruled them could not have said. Foreshadowing. Gollum used to wear it at first, till it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin till it galled him, and now he usually hid it in a hole in the rock on his island, and was always going back to look at it, and still sometimes he put it on when he could not bear to be parted from it any longer, or when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish. Then he would creep along the dark passages looking for stray goblins. He might even venture into places where torches were lit and made his eyes blink and smart. For he would be safe. Oh yes, quite safe. No one would see him. No one would notice him until he had his fingers on their throat. Only a few hours ago, he had worn it and caught a small goblin imp. How it squeaked! He still had a bone or two left to gnaw, but he wanted something softer. Quite safe, yes, he whispered to himself. It won't see us, will it, my precious? No, it won't see us, and its nasty little sword will be useless, yes, quite. That is what was in his wicked little mind as he slipped suddenly from Bilbo's side and flapped back to his boat and went off into the dark. Bilbo thought he heard the last of him. Still, he waited a while, for he had no idea how to find his way out. Suddenly, he heard a screech, sent a shiver down his back. Gollum was cursing and wailing away in the gloom, not very far off by the sound of it. He was on his island, scrabbling here and there, searching and seeking in vain. Where is it? Where is it? Bilbo heard him crying, "Lost it, my precious, lost, lost. Curse us and crush us, my precious is lost." "Oh, what's the matter?" cried Gollum. "What have you lost?" "It mustn't ask us," shrieked Gollum. "Not its business. No, Gollum, lost. Gollum, Gollum, Gollum." "Well, so am I," cried Bilbo, "and I would like to get unlost, and I won the game and you promised, so come along. Come and let me out, and then go on with your looking." Utterly miserable as Gollum sounded, Bilbo could not find much pity in his heart, and he had a feeling that anything Gollum wanted so much he could hardly be something good. "Come along," he shouted. "No, not yet, precious," Gollum answered. "We must search for it. It's lost, Gollum." "But you never guessed my last question, and you promised." "Never guessed," said Gollum. Then suddenly out of the gloom it gave a sharp hiss. "What has it got in its pockets? Tell us that. It must tell first." As far as Bilbo knew, there was no particular reason why he should not tell. Gollum's mind had jumped to a guess quicker than his. Naturally, for Gollum had brooded for ages over one thing. Naturally, for Gollum had brooded for ages on this one thing, and was always afraid of it being stolen, but Bilbo was annoyed at the delay. After all, he had won the game pretty fairly at horrible risk. "Answers were to be guessed, not given," he said. "But it wasn't a fair question," said Gollum. "Not a riddle, precious, no." "Oh, well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions," Bilbo replied, "then I asked one first. What have you lost? Tell me that." "What has it got in its pockets?" The sound of hissing louder and sharper, and as he looked towards it, to his alarm, Bilbo now saw two small points of light peering towards him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light in his eyes burned with a pale flame. "What have you lost?" Bilbo persisted. But now the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire. It was coming swiftly nearer. Gollum was on his boat again, paddling wildly back onto the dark shore. In such a rage of loss and suspicion was his heart that no sword had any more terror for him. Bilbo could not guess what maddened the wretched creature, but he saw that all was up and that Gollum meant to murder him at any rate. Just in time, he turned and ran blindly back down the dark passage which he had come, keeping close to the wall, feeling it with his left hand. "What has it got in its pockets?" he heard the hiss loud behind him, and a splash as Gollum leapt from his boat. "What have I wonder?" he said to himself, as he panted and stumbled along. He put his left hand in his pocket. The ring felt very cold as it quietly slipped onto his groping forefinger. The hiss was close behind him. He turned now. He saw Gollum's eyes like small green lamps coming up the slopes. Terrified, he tried to run faster, but suddenly he struck his toes on a snag in the floor and fell flat with his little sword under him. In a moment, Gollum was on him, but before Bilbo could do anything, recover his breath, pick himself up, or wave his sword, Gollum passed by, taking no notice of him, cursing and whispering as he ran. What could it mean? Gollum could see in the dark. Bilbo could see the light in his eyes painfully shining even from behind. Painfully, he got up and sheathed his sword, which was now glowing faintly again. Then, very cautiously, he followed. There seemed nothing else to do. It was no good crawling back to Gollum's water. Perhaps if he followed him, Gollum might lead him to some way of escape without meaning to. "Curse it, curse it, curse it," hissed Gollum. "Curse the Bagginses, it's gone. What has got in its pockets? Oh, we guess, my precious. He found it. Yes, he must have my birthday present." Bilbo picked up his ears. He was at last beginning to guess himself. He hurried a little, getting as close as he dared behind Gollum, who was still going quickly, not looking back, but turning his head from side to side, as Bilbo could see from the faint glimmer on the walls. "My birthday present. Curse it, how did we lose it, my precious? Yes, that's it. When we came this way, when we twisted the nasty young squeaker, that's it. Curse it, slipped from us for all these ages and ages as Gollum." Suddenly, Gollum sat down and began to weep, a whistling and gurgling sound horrible to listen to. Bilbo halted and flattened himself against the tunnel wall, and while Gollum stopped weeping and began to walk, he seemed to be having an argument with himself. No good going back there to search. No, he doesn't remember all the places we visited, and it's no use. The Bagginses has got it in his pockets. The nasty noser found it, we says. We guesses, by precious. We only guesses. We can't know till we find the nasty creature and squeezes it. But it doesn't know what the precious can do, does it? It'll just keep it in its pockets. It doesn't know, and it can't go far. It's lost itself, the nasty nosy thing. It doesn't know the way out. It said so. It said so, yes, but it's tricksy. It doesn't say what it means. It won't say what it's got in its pockets. It knows. It knows a way in. It must know a way out. Yes, it's off to the back door. To the back door, that's it. Goblins will catch it then. It can't be out of that way, precious. Gollum, goblins is, yes, but it's got the precious, our precious present. Now goblins will get it, Gollum. They'll find it, they'll find out what it does, and we shan't be safe again, ever, Gollum. One of the goblins will put it on, and then no one will see him. He'll be there, but not be seen. Not even our clever eyes will notice him, and he'll come creepsy and tricksy and catch us, Gollum. Now let's stop talking, precious, and make haste. The Baggins has gone this way. It must go quick and see. Go, not far now, make haste. With a spring, Gollum got up and started shambling off at a great pace. Bilbo hurried after him, still cautiously, although his chief fear now was of tripping on another snag and falling with a noise. His head was in a whirl of hope and wonder. It seemed the ring he had was a magic ring. It made you invisible. He had heard of such things, of course, in old tales, but it was hard to believe that he had really found one by accident. Still, there it was. Gollum with his bright eyes had passed him by, only a yard to one side. On they went, Gollum flip-flapping ahead, hissing and cursing, Bilbo behind as softly as a hobbit can go. Soon they came to a place where, as Bilbo noticed on his way down, side passages opened. This way and that, Gollum began at once to count them. 1 left, yes. 1 right, yes. 2 right, yes, yes. 2 left, yes, yes. And so on. As the count grew, he slowed down, for he was getting shaky and weepy, for he was leaving the water further and further behind, and he was getting afraid. Goblins might be about, and he had lost his ring. At last he stopped by a low opening on their left as they went up. 7 right, yes. 6 left, yes. He whispered, this is it, the way to the back door, yes. Here's the passage. He peered in and shrank back. But we dursn't go in, precious, we dursn't. Goblins is down there, lots of goblins as we smell them. What shall we do? Curse them and crush them. We must wait here, precious. Wait a bit and see. So they came to a dead stop. Gollum had brought Bilbo all the way out after all, but Bilbo could not get in. There was Gollum, sitting humped up right at the opening with his eyes gleaming cold in his head as he swayed from side to side between his knees. Bilbo crept away from the wall more quietly than a mouse, but Gollum stiffened at once and sniffed. His eyes went green. He hissed softly but menacingly. Could not see the hobbit. Now he was on the alert, and he had other senses that the darkness had sharpened, hearing and smell. He seemed to be crouched right down with his flat hands splayed on the floor, and his head thrust out, his nose almost to the stone, though he was only a black shadow in the gleam of his own eyes. Bilbo could see or feel that he was tense as a bowstring gathering for a spring. Bilbo almost stopped breathing and went stiff himself. He was desperate. He must get away out of this horrible darkness. While he had any strength left, he must fight. He must stab the foul thing and put its eyes out and kill it. It meant to kill him. No, not a fair fight. He was invisible now. Gollum had no sword. Gollum had not actually threatened to kill him, or tried yet. And he was miserable, alone, and lost. A sudden understanding, a pity mixed with horror welled up in Bilbo's heart. A glimpse of endless, unmarked days without light or hope of betterment, hard stone, cold fish sneaking and whispering. All of these thoughts passed in a flash of a second. He trembled. And then, quite suddenly, in another flash, as if lifted by a new strength and resolve, he leapt. Not a great leap for a man, but a leap in the dark. Straight over Golem's head he jumped, 7 feet forwards and 3 feet in the air. Indeed, had he known it, he only just missed cracking his skull in the low arch of the passage. Golem threw himself backwards and grabbed as the hobbit flew over him, but too late. His hand snapped in thin air, and Golem, falling fair on his sturdy feet, or Bilbo, falling fair on his sturdy feet, sped off down the new tunnel. He did not turn to see what Golem was doing. There was a hissing and cursing almost at his heels at first, then it stopped. All at once there came a blood-curdling shriek filled with hatred and despair. Golem was defeated. He dared not go further. He had lost his prey, and lost, too, the only thing he had ever cared about, his precious. The cry brought Bilbo's heart to his mouth, but still he held on. Now a faint as an echo, but menacing, the voice came. Thief, thief, thief beckons as we hates it. We hates it forever. Then there was silence, but that too seemed menacing to Bilbo. If goblins are so near that he smelt them, he thought, then they'll have heard his shrieking and cursing. Careful now, or this way will lead you to worse things. The passage was low and roughly made. It was not too difficult for the hobbit, except when, in spite of all care, he stubbed his poor toes again several times on nasty, jagged stones on the floor. A bit low for goblins, at least big ones, thought Bilbo, not knowing that even the big ones, the orcs of the mountains, go along at great speed, stooping low with their hands almost on the ground. Soon the passage that had been sloping down began to slope up again. After a while, it climbed steeply. That slowed Bilbo down, but at last the slope stopped. The passage turned a corner and dipped down again, and there, at the bottom of a short incline, he saw, filtering around another corner, a glimpse of light. Not red light of fire or lantern, but pale, out-of-doors sort of light. Then Bilbo began to run. Scuttling as fast as his legs would carry him, he turned the last corner and came suddenly right into an open space where the light, after all that time in the darkness, seemed dazzlingly bright. Really, it was only a leaking sunshine through a doorway where a great door, a stone door, was left standing open. Bilbo blinked, and suddenly he saw the goblins in full armor with drawn swords, sitting just inside the door and watching it with their wide eyes and watching the passage that led to it. They were aroused, alert, and ready for anything. They saw him sooner than he saw them. Yes, they saw him, whether it was an accident or a last trick of the ring before it took its new master. It was not on his finger. With yells of delight, the goblins rushed upon him. A pang of fear and loss, like an echo of Golem's misery, smote Bilbo, and forgetting even to draw his sword, he stuck his hands in his pocket, and there was the ring, still in his left pocket, and it slipped on his finger. The goblins stopped short. They could not see a sign of him. He had vanished. They yelled twice as loud as before, but not so delightedly. "Where is it?" they cried. "Go, back up the passage," some shouted. "This way," some yelled. "That way," others yelled. "Look out for the door," bellowed the captain. Whistles blew and armor clashed and swords rattled and goblins cursed and swore and ran hither and thither, falling over one another and getting very angry. There was a terrible outcry, to-do and disturbance. Bilbo was dreadfully frightened, but he had the sense to understand what happened and to sneak behind a big barrel which held drink for the goblin guards, and so get out of the way to avoid being bumped into, trampled to death, or caught by feel. Must get to the door, he kept saying to himself. But it was a long time before he ventured to try. By then it was like a horrible game of blind man's bluff. The place was full of goblins running about, and the poor little hobbit dodged this way and that way and was knocked over by a goblin who could not make out what he had bumped into, and scrambled away on all fours and slipped between the legs of the captain just in time, got up and ran for the door. It was still ajar, but a goblin was pushing it nearly to. Bilbo struggled, but he could not move. He tried to squeeze through the crack. He squeezed and squeezed. He was stuck. It was awful. His buttons had gotten wedged on the edge of the door and the doorpost. He could see outside into the open air. There were a few steps running down into a narrow valley beyond, between tall mountains. The sun came out from behind the cloud and shone bright on the outside of the door, but he could not get through. Suddenly, one of the goblins inside shouted, "There's a shadow by the door. Something's outside." Bilbo's heart jumped into his mouth. He gave a terrific squirm. Buttons burst off in all directions, and he was through, with a torn coat and waistcoat, leaping down the steps like a goat, while bewildered goblins were picking up his nice brass buttons on the doorstep. Of course, they soon came down after him, hooting and hollering and hunting among the trees, but they didn't like the sun. It makes their legs wobble and their heads giddy. They could not find Bilbo with the ring on, slipping in and out of the shadow of the trees and running quick and quiet and keeping out of the sun. So soon they went back grumbling or cursing to guard the door. Bilbo had escaped. There we are. Chapter 5 is done. And my voice is done too. So, thank you for joining in on chapter 4 and 5. Just in time for Yom Tov. Beautiful. Well, enjoy your Yom Tov. And I will see you around for the next stream, and let me know when works best for you to do the next Hobbit section, and we'll do that. Yeah. So until then, I'm gonna I'll try and do a schedule every week, and I'll send you out on an email. So just let me know what days you want to do the Hobbit, and we'll aim for that. So, all right. Have a great evening. I will see you